How good is it, firstly, to have sunshine this morning? Seems like a bit of a luxury here in Sydney, right, to have sunshine? But also, how good is it to be back live in person? You know, we've spent so much time over the last couple of years being behind screens, and whilst that's been great to connect us with, people all over the world, there's nothing like being back in live events. So thank you to Linda, to Sophie, to the entire MFA team for putting this on, to all of you for showing up today and for inviting me here to speak to you today. We're going to be chatting about open-minded leaders, but before I get into that, I want to also pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather here today, the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that out to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that might be joining us today or watching this on a replay. And as we interact today, as we have a conversation, as we share our stories, may we tread gently on their land. So thank you, Mike, for that great session. I hope this new fancy thing works now, we'll see. But I'm going to be talking to you about what it means to be open-minded leaders and how that then leads to growth and innovation and diversity and creativity. But before we get into that, let me share a little bit more about my leadership journey with you. So you heard a little bit through that introduction, but my leadership journey has been, in the majority of space, in change and project management for over a decade. And I've also had roles in strategy and business and HR, inclusion and diversity. And through that, I had the opportunity to work in many diverse teams, but also to lead many high-performing diverse teams as well. And it's been really interesting to see over the years, as you would have seen as well, the change in leadership and styles of leadership. There was a time when being a leader meant you had to be really loud and command the room and be really having authority. But over the years, you've seen now there's a change in leadership where you want leaders to be more vulnerable, to share story, to really think about people in their team and be leading beside them. And when I think about my first role in leadership many, many years ago, I was given the title of a leader, and I had one direct report. And I thought, I'm a leader now. I'm a leader. And I made that role all about me. What I wanted, my career choices, everything was about me in the role. But I really realized very early on that leadership is not so much about me, but it's more about the team, the people around me, and about how I need to listen, learn, and lead those people. So we're going to get into more of that. But I've shared with you a little bit about my leadership journey, so let's open it up to the room here. How many of you here this morning are leaders? Show of hands, good old show of hands. How many of you are leaders here today? Okay, great. Let's ask another question. Now, when I asked you that and I said, how many of you are leaders, what qualified that answer for you? What made you think, well, I'm a leader, so I'm going to put my hand up, or no, I'm not, so I'm not going to put my hand up, all right? So how many of you put your hand up because you have a title of a leader? Anyone? Okay, if you're at the back, great, thank you. How many put your hand up because you went, not so much a title, but I have a team, I lead people? Okay, great. Anyone put their hand up for a completely different reason? Great. Throw out to me, what was your reason? I can hear you.
We're all leaders. You don't need a team to be a leader.
Excellent. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Anyone else? Someone put their hand up here? Was it you, Mike?
I did, yes.
Yes.
I started the company.
You started the company. You're a founder. You're a leader. Excellent. So you'll see just by people's answers in the room here that the definition of leadership is different. But what's happened over time is that society and the way we've been taught, and I was taught growing up, was that to be a leader, we needed to have a title, a certain number of direct reports or a team, or a certain number of years in an organization in order to be a leader. And I'm here to disrupt that for you today, because I don't think it is about your title or your years in the organization or the people in your team. Being a leader is about how we show up, how we lead by example. And then what do we do with the people, and how do we communicate, respond, and operate with the teams around us? So what do I think about being a leader? I'm going to share with you the 3 L's. The first one here is to listen. As leaders, we must be willing to listen. Now, in the crazy busy world that we live in today, where information is thrown at us at a rate that it never has before, and it's never going to be this slow again, it's beautiful to be able to just sit quietly and listen to someone. But when I talk about listening here, I'm not talking about the kind of listening that I'm sometimes guilty of doing as well, which is when someone's speaking, I'm listening to respond. So someone's speaking and I'm going, oh, I know what to say next. I can see myself in that story. I'm going to respond. The type of listening I'm talking about here today is listening to understand. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Stephen Covey. And as leaders, we must be willing to listen to the quietest voice in the room. Listen to the person who sometimes might not even say anything. Listen to what people are saying to us through their body language. Listen to the different perspective in the room, the person that might not look like us, sound like us, speak like us. But we have to be willing to listen. The next L, in terms of leadership, is that we have to be willing to learn. Willing to continuously learn and to continuously grow. Now, when I think back to my first role of leadership with my one direct report, I thought becoming a leader meant I now needed to have all the answers. And if I needed to have all the answers, it means surely I know everything. I don't need to learn anything more. How wrong was I? How wrong was I? Because as leaders, we must be willing to learn new ways of doing things, be open to diverse perspectives and different ways of doing things, and to continuously learn. And I left corporate about a year ago, and I started my own coaching and speaking business. And I work with clients professionally and personally, whether it's through transformation or through, encouraging them to share their story and message. And now, like when I coach them, they'll often tell me, oh, thank you for breaking that down for me and explaining it so well. You're such a great leader and a coach. And I say to them that the reason I'm a good leader, the reason I'm a good teacher, is because I am a forever student. Forever student. And I can caveat that by saying it did not start in school. Do not talk to my mum or any of my school teachers. It did not start in university. But through my leadership journey, I realized that we have to be willing as leaders to learn, to listen and to learn. We don't have to have all the right answers, but we have to be willing to ask the questions and then to listen. And the third L that I want to talk to you about, let's see this, if it's going to work, there we go, is to lead. Now, it seems pretty common sense that, about leadership, we're going to lead. But what I mean here by leading is leading through uncertainty. Leading even when we can't see the step forward. Even when that path is not defined, leading and being willing to take that first step. Being willing to say the things that nobody is saying, to do the things that nobody is doing, to ask the questions that nobody is asking, so you can see the change that you want to see. And you, my friends here today, are the changers. You are the people that are creating the content that we are consuming, hearing, listening to. You are changing and making changes not just for this generation, but for generations and generations to come. Probably generations that we would never even meet. And at times when you want to see that change, you think, things are not changing. I wish they would change. At times we're not seeing that change because it's in those moments that you must be the change. You must be willing to say those things that people are not saying, ask the questions and do the things in order to see that change. So I ask you today, as you leave here today, what are you going to be doing differently? Because I understand that when it comes to doing things differently, it can be scary. If I'm going to step out where I can't see the path, what is someone going to think? What is someone going to say? And when we think about change and transformation itself is this massive word. We can think that it needs to be big, bold things that we need to do. But it's often not. Often change is doing one thing differently, taking one step that was different than the one we did yesterday. So as you leave here today, let's think about it and write down, what are you going to do differently? Are you going to listen? Are you going to learn something new? Or are you going to lead differently? How many people here are going to listen more? Actively listen, right hand in the air. Okay, great. How many people are going to learn something new? Left hand in the air as you leave here today. Excellent. How many people are doing both? You can put both hands in the air if you want. Excellent, okay. If you're going to do all three, you're going to listen, learn, and lead, put both hands in the air and give me a clap as well, which is great. Amazing, amazing, awesome, great. Okay. Now the reason I asked you to do that today and commit here right now is because you're becoming accountable, not just to yourself, but to people sitting in this room. So when you leave here today, you go, you committed to learn, and I committed to lead differently, and somebody else committed to listen. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's hold each other accountable as we leave here today to do those things differently. So now that we've spoken about leadership, let's look at what it means to be an open-minded leader. Now, open-mindedness is a very interesting thing, and the first time I thought about, now I need to be open-minded, I thought, okay, from today going forth, I'm going to be open-minded. I have made a decision, and now I'm going to take an action, and I'm just going to be open-minded. Every conversation that I have, every interaction that I have, every time I speak to somebody, it's easy. I'll just be open-minded. Doesn't really work that way. Doesn't work that way. Because we will often be put in situations and circumstances where we are challenged, where our perspectives are challenged, our opinions are challenged. And it is in those moments that we have to be willing to look within, to check. Mike spoke about the different forms of biases and gave us some tools around what we need to do. And in those moments, we must be willing to look within, to then change what we're seeing outside. So the way that I look at open-mindedness is an internal reflection that then changes our outward perception. But let's look at now what we mean by each of them. So, firstly, we need to be open to different perspectives. Perspectives from different people, people that don't look like us, don't speak like us, don't sound like us. So, let's all stand up. We're going to do a little exercise now. Let's stand up. You've been sitting down for very long. Let's stand up. And I love it when everybody stands and then you can still see me. It doesn't happen very often, but it's great. Okay, so let's put your finger in the, your hand in the air with your finger pointing to the ceiling. And then I want you to draw a circle on the ceiling in a clockwise direction. So 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 30 centimeter diameter. And keep making the circle with your finger pointed to the ceiling, but slowly I want you to lower your arm. So keep circling, finger pointed up, but lower your arm so that it comes down to about eye level. Keep making the circle, big 30 centimeter diameter, but keep lowering your circle so it's still down at about stomach level. And if you've been following my instructions and doing exactly what I've been telling you to do, you will now notice that your circle is actually moving in an anti-clockwise direction. I don't know, some of you are going, what just happened? Let's try it again. Finger in the air, make a circle in a clockwise direction. Okay, keep your finger up and then just lower it down, lower your arm down, all the way down till it's below your stomach, and you'll notice it's in an anti-clockwise direction. And you're like, what just happened? What just happened? Nothing, I didn't do anything. The only thing that changed for you was your perspective. You can sit down. That's the only thing that changed. And it is so interesting because perspective is exactly that. It's how we are looking at something. the lens that we look at it through, the angle that we're standing. Sometimes it's the experiences in life that we've had that change these perspectives. And I'm going to be honest with you because you seem like a trustworthy bunch of people. When I first heard about that, and if someone told me, well, you're going to put your finger in the air and go in clockwise and then come down, it's going to be anti-clockwise, I would have said, no way. No way, ain't going to happen, right? Because that's the thing with perspective. It's like, well, I know this way, this is my view. But we're going to be, as we go out from here, challenged with different perspectives. And I'm going to encourage you that rather than saying, no way, not going to happen, let's change it and say, wow, show me how. Tell me more. Let's explore that. How did you get to that? Because that's when we will bring more diversity of perspective and more diversity of thought into everything that we're doing. All right, the next thing I want to talk to you about, that one, okay, is we must put people before their identity. People before their identity. Now, I get that identity is really important because it's how we show up and how we identify. And while it's important for awareness and understanding, we then shouldn't use that identity to label people, box them in, and then judge them based on that identity. So what do I mean by person before the identity? So let me give you an example. I'll use myself as an example here. So I am a person of color. I know you're thinking, what gave that away? I get it, okay? But here's a funny thing. I grew up in India back in the 1980s. I did school and university there and then moved to Australia. And in India, in school, I was bullied. In college, I was bullied for being different. But with all of that happened, I never thought of myself in India as a person of color. Because in India, everybody is a person of color with just a different shade. But all of a sudden, when I moved to Australia many years ago as an international student, and if anyone's come here as an international student or moved abroad where you've had to, migrate somewhere for work, people tell you what to expect. They go, it's going to be this way or that way. When I landed here, I realized that all of a sudden now, I was a person of color. And back then, I would often find myself in rooms where I was the only person of color. And years later, I came out. So then I became a gay person of color. Now, I have a lovely wife, and she lives and navigates life with both a physical and mental health disability. And over the last year, I've been doing my own reflection around my own identity, and I now identify as a non-binary person. So I've just shared with you a little bit about my own identity. Now, I get that I'm just one person in billions and billions in this vast humanity that we have. But I could be that one person in your team, that one person in your organization, that one person who's your client or customer. So it's really important that when we're engaging, when we're communicating, that we ensure that we involve everybody and put the person before their identity. So I'm not an Indian person or a gay person. I'm a person who was born in India. I'm a person who happens to be gay. My wife is not a disabled person. She's a person that lives with a disability. We must put the person before their identity. And one of the ways we can do this is through the language that we use, through inclusive language. So using terms that are gender neutral, terms that are universal. So rather than ladies and gentlemen, everybody, everyone. And using people's pronouns. So my pronouns are she and they. And when we know people's pronouns, it's really important that we use that. And when we came into this room in the morning, we were all networking, and I sat at my table, and I'd introduce myself, and I'd say I'm Nerissa, and if someone said their name back to me, and I didn't catch their name, I'd say, can you please pronounce that again? And when they said it to me, I know it now, and I'll say it the right way. And it's exactly the same with people's pronouns and the way that they want to be identified and spoken to. So we must put the person before their identity. The next bit that I want to talk to you about is that we need to ensure that everybody belongs. As leaders, we need to ensure that everyone belongs. And belonging is really interesting because if I think back to the story I told you about India and being bullied at, school and college, I really didn't feel like I belonged there. Definitely did not. But then when I think about a time here when I was in a team and we were just about to get married actually, it was before marriage equality was passed here, and my team did this big celebration. They brought in cards and a cake and really celebrated us, not just me, but my wife and what was about to happen. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. Like, I feel this deep sense of belonging here. So we're all going to do an exercise here together now. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Don't worry, I'm not no voodoo magic stuff. Just close your eyes. And I want you now to think about a time when you felt a deep sense of belonging. It might have been in school, it might have been at work, out volunteering somewhere where you thought, you know what, these people really get me. They're my tribe. And I want to acknowledge here that there could be people in the room that have not felt that sense of belonging. And if you haven't, I want you to think about what could you have done in that moment to create that sense of belonging. And when you've each identified it, keep your eyes closed, but just give me a nod. I'm not going to ask you to share. I just want to know that you've identified a moment. So just give me a nod. Thank you. I can see you. I got you. All right. Keep your eyes closed now, but let's take this a bit further. Think about in that moment that you've identified, what was it? What exactly was it in that moment that happened that made you feel that sense of belonging? Was it something that someone said? Something that they did? Was it how they made you feel that created that deep sense of belonging? And when you've identified that, keep your eyes closed, but just please raise your hand. Again, I'm not going to ask you to share. I just want to know that you've identified a moment and connected with what happened in the moment. Thank you. Just keep your hand raised. Keep your hand raised. Okay. Keep your hand raised now and just open your eyes and look around the room. You'll notice that almost everyone here has at some point felt a deep sense of belonging. But not just felt it, you actually know what it is in that moment that created it for you. And I want you right now to anchor this feeling in and then take it with you as you leave here from today to ensure that every time you meet somebody, every interaction you have, every conversation you have, that you are saying to people there, and how are you going to create that sense of belonging for that person so that through everything you do, we're saying to people, welcome, you belong here. Welcome, you belong here. It doesn't matter if it's their first day at work. It doesn't matter how long you've known this client. I want you to take what you felt in this moment right here and ensure how can I create that for the next person that I meet. The next bit I want to talk to you about is new ways of working that wraps up open-minded leadership. Now, we have to be willing as leaders to think about new ways of working. And if we think about the last 2 years that we've had, we've been put in situations where we've had to come up with new ways of working. Jobs that couldn't be done at home within days, we were doing at home. We've had to find new ways of working, new ways of communicating, new ways of living, new ways of even speaking to the people that we live with. So if there's learning to take from that, it's what can I take as a learning into the work that I'm doing now? How can I look at new ways of doing something? And often it isn't creating something new, it's thinking about how can I build a connection to existing things that we've done, because that's what creativity is. It doesn't have to be a new idea all the time, but it's a new way of looking at something and building that connection to create it. So the next time someone comes to you and says, we've done something this way for so long, let's do it again, think about how can you challenge that? How can you suggest something different? How can you say that thing that hasn't been said before and do the thing that hasn't been done before so you can now create that new way of working? Because if we're constantly doing what we've always done, we're going to get the result that we've always gotten. So if you want to be the changes and create change that is going to happen, then we have to be willing to do something different, to come up with new ways of working. So if anyone comes to you and says, let's do something different, rather than going no, let's approach it with yes. and then work through it. Because we have to approach it with yes and be willing to make that change. So that's what it means to be open-minded leaders. But I want to share with you now a little story to wrap this up. And it's a story that a lovely friend of mine shared with me about these people in ancient India. Lovely group of people, but they had never seen an elephant. They had heard of what it would be like. They had this perceived notion of what it might be like, but they had never, ever seen one. So rather than taking them to see an elephant, the village elder said, let's go on this expedition. And he took them all out, but he blindfolded them. He blindfolded them, and then he brought the elephant in. So each person went up to go and touch the elephant to see what it felt like. And the first person felt the elephant's body and went, whoa, this is like it's really firm. It must be like a wall that expands. Another person looked at the elephant's trunk and went, ooh, this feels like a bit of a snake that moves. Another person looked at the leg of the elephant and went, this is like a tree trunk. It has roots going deep into the earth. Another person held the tail of the elephant and went, ooh, this is a bit like a rope that I could swing on. Another person felt the ear of the elephant and went, this is big and flappy. Feels like this magic carpet that I can fly across the season. And when the village elder came back, he found them all arguing about, no, it's like a wall, it's like a tree, it's like a carpet. Kept arguing until he removed their blindfolds. And what they realized in that moment was that it wasn't that their perspective was wrong, but it was that they had to put all of their perspectives together to see the full picture, the big picture. And that is what is going to happen with us as we leave here today, that I want to take you to take out from here, is that when we're thinking about different perspectives, it's not that we're wrong or incorrect. But if we want to encourage diversity, if we want to encourage growth and innovation, then we have to be willing to consider different perspectives. We have to be willing to listen, to learn, and to lead. So I'll leave you with this quote by the lovely Maya Angelou, where she says, do the best you can until you know better. But when you know better, let's do better. Thank you.